Chosen one, why are you still breathing? No, really, why didn't you break when they said you would? Why didn't you lose your mind during that season that should have hospitalized you? Why are you still standing when everyone, including you, expected collapse? Here's what nobody's telling you. You didn't survive by accident. You passed. Listen to me very carefully. If you're hearing my voice right now, if something pulled you to this message at this exact moment, this is not coincidence. This is not another motivational speech to make you feel better for 20 minutes. This is confirmation of something that was spoken about you in a realm you cannot see. You've been wondering why the silence felt so heavy, haven't you? Why God seemed 1,000 miles away while you were bleeding out spiritually. Why your prayers echoed in what felt like an empty room. But what if I told you that silence wasn't absence, it was observation? You were being watched, tested, measured, and you passed a test you didn't even know you were taking. Romans 8:18 declares, I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us, not to us, in us. Something was forged inside you during that fire, something the enemy tried to burn away but only made stronger. And now, right now, there's a verdict that's been sealed in the courtroom of heaven. But here's what's about to shock you to your core. While you thought you were forgotten, there was a conversation happening about you. Words were spoken, declarations were made, and what was said, oh beloved, what was said will shatter every lie you've believed about your worth, your future, your calling. Before we go deeper, I want to pause and thank every single one of you who has supported this message through Super Thanks. Your generosity means more than you know. You're not just giving, you're helping spread light to others who feel alone in their calling. Whether you give or not, I'm deeply grateful for your presence here. Your support, your time, your attention, it all matters. And if this message resonates with your soul, go ahead and sow that seed of faith. James 1:12 says, Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because, having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life. You stood the test, chosen one. And the crown isn't coming. It's already been prepared. Before this message ends, I will tell you exactly what was said about you in the unseen realm. But you won't understand it unless you first understand what you survived. If your spirit feels unusually still right now, if something ancient is waking up in your chest quietly, type below, I'm still here. Because, beloved, your test is over. But your coronation, that's just beginning. Tell me something honest. When was the last time you felt seen? When was the last time someone looked at your life and said, I know what you've been carrying, and I see how heavy it is? When was the last time your faithfulness got noticed by anyone other than God? Here's what's breaking my heart right now. You've been waiting for a test that looks like a test. You've been expecting trials that announce themselves with trumpets and drama, but the test you just passed, it didn't come with fanfare. It came disguised as something far more brutal. It came as silence. For years, decades for some of you, you've been praying the same prayers. You've been believing the same promises. You've been standing on the same scriptures while your knees grew weak and your faith felt thin as paper. And nobody knew. Your children didn't see it. Your spouse couldn't understand it. Even your church family had no idea you were fighting for your spiritual life every single morning at 5 a.m. in that kitchen, whispering prayers through tears. The test wasn't about whether you could handle the storm. The test was whether you'd keep praying when the storm never came, when nothing came at all. You see, most people think God's testing looks like Job's catastrophe or Daniel's lion's den. They think it's dramatic, visible, something you can point to and say, there, that's my trial. But for the chosen ones, for you, the test was far more insidious. It was the relentless, suffocating ordinariness of being overlooked while staying obedient. Listen to what 1 Peter 1:6-7 tells us. In all this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. These have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor. Greater worth than gold. But here's what they don't tell you about gold. It doesn't become valuable in the display case. It becomes valuable in the furnace, under crushing pressure, in temperatures that would destroy lesser materials. And nobody sees that process. Nobody applauds the refining. The gold doesn't get recognition until after it's been through hell. That's been your life, hasn't it? You've been in the furnace while everyone else was at the festival. You've been under pressure while others were posting their victories on social media. You've been refined in secret while the world moved on without you. And the cruelest part? You started wondering if you'd done something wrong. If maybe your faith wasn't strong enough. If perhaps God was blessing everyone else because they deserved it more than you did. But what if, and hear me clearly, what if your invisibility was actually God's highest compliment? What if He only entrusts the silent test to those whose faith doesn't need an audience? Psalm 66:10 declares, "For you, God, tested us. You refined us like silver, not gold this time, silver." And silver refiners in the ancient world knew something profound. They knew the silver was fully refined when they could see their own reflection in it. The refiner would sit for hours, watching, waiting, never leaving the furnace, because if silver stayed in the heat 1 second too long, it would be destroyed. God never left you in that silence. He was watching your reflection form in the fire. He was waiting for the moment when He could see Himself clearly in you, when your faith looked less like human effort and more like divine nature. But here's what breaks me. Most people fail this test not by sinning, not by falling into obvious rebellion, but by quitting quietly. They don't renounce God dramatically, they just stop showing up. They let the silence convince them that their prayers don't matter, their faith doesn't work, their calling was imaginary. They were 3 days away from breakthrough and walked away on day 2. You know what separated you from them? You stayed. When staying felt stupid, you stayed. When leaving made logical sense, you stayed. When every voice, including your own, said just give up, something inside you whispered, not yet. That wasn't optimism, beloved. That wasn't stubbornness. That was divine DNA refusing to quit because heaven had already declared your victory before your battle even started. And now, right now, you're sitting on the other side of what should have destroyed you. You're still here, still believing, still standing. And heaven is saying something about you that your mind hasn't caught up to yet. The test you never saw coming. You passed it. Not with perfect faith, not without moments of doubt, not without nights when you barely held on by a thread. But you passed it. And passing it has qualified you for something the comfortable will never carry. You think you've been forgotten. You've been prepared. You think you've been sidelined. You've been positioned. You think you've been silent too long. You've been learning the language. Heaven speaks fluently, the language of endurance. If you stayed faithful when no one clapped, when no one knew, when no one cared, type below, right now, I endured. Because what I'm about to tell you next will explain exactly why your hidden years weren't wasted years. They were necessary years. And the reward for passing this test, it's nothing you could have imagined. You know what's been tormenting you more than the struggle itself? The silence. That deafening, suffocating silence when you needed to hear God's voice the most. When you were on your knees at 3 a.m., tears streaming down your face, begging for just one word, anything, and all you got was nothing. That silence made you question everything, didn't it? You started wondering if you'd done something wrong, if God was punishing you, if maybe, just maybe, you weren't chosen after all. Maybe you were fooling yourself this whole time. But what if I told you that silence wasn't rejection? What if I told you it was the highest form of trust? Listen to me carefully, beloved. Heaven doesn't go silent because it's absent. Heaven goes silent because it's watching. There's a profound difference between being ignored and being observed. Think about this. When a teacher gives an exam, what does she do? Does she hover over your shoulder, whispering the answers? Does she guide your hand across the page? No. She steps back. She watches. She's completely silent. Not because she doesn't care about your success, but because the test requires her silence to be valid. Your silence was your validation. Isaiah 30:18 says something that will rock your world. Yet the Lord longs to be gracious to you, therefore he will rise up to show you compassion. For the Lord is a God of justice. Blessed are all who wait for him. Did you catch that? He was longing to speak to you, aching to comfort you, but he was waiting. Why? Because something was being established in you that required his strategic silence. You see, God wasn't testing your ability to hear him. He was testing your ability to trust him when you couldn't, and you did. You're still here, that's the proof. But let me take you deeper into this mystery. Psalm 46:10 commands us, "Be still and know that I am God." The Hebrew word for be still is rapha. It means to let go, to release, to stop striving. God was teaching you something in that silence that he couldn't teach you any other way. He was teaching you that your faith doesn't depend on feelings. Your calling doesn't depend on constant confirmation. Your identity doesn't depend on hearing his voice every single day. He was teaching you to know him, not just to hear him. Think about a seed buried in dark soil. Can it see the sun? No. Can it feel the warmth? No. Does it hear the gardener's voice? No. It sits in complete darkness, in what feels like a grave, wondering if it's been abandoned. But that gardener hasn't forgotten that seed. He's watching, waiting, because he knows something the seed doesn't. The darkness isn't punishment, it's preparation. The silence isn't absence, it's strategy. And when that seed finally breaks through the soil, it will carry life because of what happened in the dark, not in spite of it. You were that seed, chosen one. And right now, you're breaking through. But here's what the enemy was doing during your silent season. He was whispering lies. God's not real. Prayer doesn't work. You're wasting your time. Look around, everyone else is getting their breakthroughs. Everyone else is hearing from God. But you're forgotten. And some of you believed it. You stopped praying as fervently. You stopped believing as boldly. You started to settle, to shrink, to accept that maybe this is just your lot in life. But that's exactly what hell wanted. Because the enemy knew something you didn't. You were in the refiner's fire. Malachi 3:3 tells us that God will sit as a refiner and purifier of silver. Do you know what a refiner does? He doesn't throw silver into fire and walk away. No. He sits. He watches. He's completely focused, totally silent, his eyes fixed on that metal. Why? Because he's waiting for the exact moment when all the impurities have been burned away and he can see his own reflection in the silver. Only then does he remove it from the fire. God was sitting with you in that silence, watching you, refining you, removing every false belief, every toxic dependency, every counterfeit comfort. He was burning away your need for constant affirmation so he could build in you an unshakable faith. The kind of faith that doesn't need to feel good to know it's real. The kind of faith that doesn't need to see the path to keep walking. The kind of faith that doesn't need to hear the voice to trust the heart. And now you carry something most believers will never have tested: faith, proven faith. The kind of faith that makes demons tremble because they know you've been through the fire and came out refined. Heaven doesn't speak during the test, it speaks after the verdict. And beloved, your verdict has been reached. The test is over. The silence is ending. But you had to go through the quiet to qualify for what's about to be said out loud. You had to experience the darkness to appreciate the light that's about to break over your life. You had to feel the abandonment to recognize the appointment. This is why your breakthrough feels different now. It's not just relief, it's authority. It's not just an answer, it's an anointing. It's not just God speaking to you, it's God speaking through you to a generation that's drowning in doubt. You thought the silence broke you, it built you. You thought the waiting weakened you, it weaponized you. You thought God's distance damaged you, it developed you. Every senior saint in this nation who has walked through the valley of silence and refused to give up, you are the proof that God still keeps his promises. You are the evidence that faith works even when feelings fail. You are the testimony that declares, I didn't need to hear his voice every day because I learned to trust his character permanently. And now, everything is about to shift. If you now understand why it was quiet, if this revelation is settling into your spirit like rain on dry ground, type below, now I see. Because what you're about to discover next will explain exactly what was being said about you while you thought no one was listening. You want to know when you passed the test? It wasn't when you raised your hands in church. It wasn't when you quoted scripture at the prayer meeting. It wasn't even when you fasted for 40 days or tithed when your bank account was screaming empty. You passed in the moment nobody saw. Listen to me carefully, chosen one. Heaven doesn't measure your faithfulness by what you do on Sunday morning when everyone's watching. Heaven measures your character by what you do Tuesday night at 2 a.m. when you're alone with your thoughts, your pain, and your choice. You passed when that person who destroyed your reputation walked into the same room as you, and you didn't expose them. When you could have ruined them with one phone call, one social media post, one whispered conversation to the right person, but you didn't. You bit your tongue until it bled, and you let God be God. You passed when your own children turned their backs on you, when they chose the world over your wisdom, when they made you feel like everything you sacrificed meant nothing. And you could have become bitter. You could have cursed them. You could have withdrawn your love and said, fine, you're on your own. But you didn't. You kept praying. You kept loving. You kept the door open even when they slammed it in your face. You passed when your spouse of 43 years took their last breath, and you woke up the next morning in an empty bed, in an empty house, with an empty future staring back at you. And you could have given up. You could have let grief turn into rage against God. You could have said, after all I've done for you, this is what I get. But you didn't. You got on your knees, and you worshipped anyway. You passed when they promoted the younger person, the less qualified person, the one who knew the right people while you'd been faithful for 30 years. And you could have sabotaged them. You could have become toxic. You could have poisoned the well on your way out. But you didn't. You blessed them and moved forward. That's when you passed, beloved. In the hidden moments, in the secret places, in the choices nobody applauded because nobody knew about them. Jesus said in Matthew 6-4, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. But it's not just about giving money. It's about giving grace when you had every right to give judgment. It's about giving forgiveness when you had every reason to give revenge. It's about giving love when the world said you'd given enough. Heaven has an invisible scoreboard. And while you thought nobody was watching, while you thought your restraint didn't matter, while you thought your integrity in the dark went unnoticed, there was an observer, a divine witness who saw every moment you chose character over comfort, every moment you chose obedience over vindication, every moment you chose God's way over your own rage. Luke 16:10 declares, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. You think that test was about the little thing, the small slight, the minor betrayal? No, that was God checking to see if he could trust you with the kingdom keys. Because if you'll stay clean when nobody's watching, you can be trusted with authority when everybody is. You know what the enemy was counting on? He was counting on you to snap. He orchestrated that whole situation, that betrayal, that disappointment, that injustice, expecting you to react the way most people react, with bitterness, with retaliation, with compromise. But you didn't give him what he expected. And that right there, that's when heaven stood up and took notice. Do you understand what you did? You didn't just survive a hard season, you passed a character examination that most people fail. You stayed faithful when faithfulness made no logical sense. You kept your integrity when integrity cost you everything. You refused to become what hurt you. That's rare, chosen one. That's so rare that heaven had to mark it, had to record it, had to seal it with a declaration. Think about Joseph in that Egyptian prison. falsely accused, forgotten by the cupbearer, rotting in a dungeon for a crime he didn't commit. He could have become bitter. He could have cursed God. He could have plotted revenge against Potiphar's wife, but he didn't. He stayed clean. He stayed faithful. He stayed ready. And when Pharaoh needed someone to interpret his dream, when Pharaoh needed someone to run an empire, God didn't choose someone from the palace. He chose the man who'd been tested in the prison, the man who passed when nobody was watching. You didn't retaliate when you had the ammunition. You didn't grow bitter when you had every reason. You didn't compromise when compromise would have been so much easier. You stayed clean, and that's when the test ended. That moment, that specific moment, when you made the choice to honor God instead of defend yourself, to trust God instead of take matters into your own hands, to wait on God instead of force your own breakthrough, that was the moment the verdict was sealed. But here's what's going to shake you. When the test ended, when you made that final choice to stay faithful in the dark, something happened in the heavenly realm. The divine observer who had been watching you, measuring you, testing you, he turned to the angelic hosts and he spoke. He said something about you, not to you, about you. Words were released into the spiritual atmosphere concerning your future, your calling, your next assignment. A declaration was made. A verdict was announced. And what was said in that moment is about to manifest in your reality. Because God doesn't just watch your test to see if you'll pass. He watches your test to determine what you're qualified to carry. And you, beloved, you just qualified for something you've been praying about for decades. You didn't know you were being tested. You thought you were just trying to survive. You thought you were just making it through another day. But heaven was running a diagnostic on your character, checking to see if you could be trusted with the weight of answered prayer. And you passed. The bitterness didn't take root. The rage didn't consume you. The betrayal didn't change who you are. You emerged from that fire with your integrity intact, your faith unshaken, your heart still soft toward God. That's not human strength, chosen one. That's divine DNA. That's proof that you're not just another believer trying to get by. You're a carrier of something sacred, something rare, something the kingdom desperately needs. If this feels personal, if every word I'm speaking is landing in your spirit like lightning type below, right now, I stayed clean. Because what I'm about to tell you next will explain why staying clean in the dark just unlocked every door that's been closed in the light. You want to know what was said about you while you thought you were forgotten? While you were sitting in that empty house at 3 in the morning, wondering if anyone noticed you were still fighting? While your own children stopped calling? While the church moved on without you? While the world convinced you that 75 years old means invisible? Let me tell you what happened in the courtroom of heaven. There was a conversation, and your name came up, not in passing, not as an afterthought. Your file was opened, your test results were examined, and the angels, oh beloved, the angels, they leaned in to hear the verdict. Do you know what they said? This one can be trusted with more. Stop. Let that settle into the deepest chamber of your heart. While you were counting your failures, heaven was counting your faithfulness. While you were seeing your wrinkles as evidence of decline, God was seeing them as proof of endurance. While you thought you were barely surviving, the Almighty was declaring you ready for promotion. Matthew 25-21 records the words that were spoken over you. Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. But here's what breaks me wide open right now. Here's what should make every single person watching this weep with recognition. You weren't tested on your success. You were tested on your silence. You weren't measured by how loud you praised when things were good. You were measured by whether you kept breathing when things went dark. They watched you bury your spouse and still whisper thank you to a God who didn't stop the cancer. They watched you open that mailbox to find another bill you couldn't pay and still tithe from your Social Security. They watched you sit alone on Christmas while your children celebrated somewhere else, and you didn't curse God. You didn't quit. You didn't turn bitter. And heaven took notes. You know what most people don't understand about divine promotion? It's not about talent. It's not about charisma. It's not about how well you perform on stage or how many people know your name. God doesn't promote the gifted. He promotes the faithful. He doesn't elevate the loud. He elevates the ones who stayed when staying hurt. Think about Abraham. God didn't test him with opportunity. He tested him with impossibility. Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and sacrifice him. Genesis 22. For 3 days, Abraham walked up that mountain carrying wood for the fire that would burn his promise. 3 days of silent obedience. 3 days of not understanding. 3 days of trusting when trust felt like insanity. And what did God say when Abraham raised that knife? Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. Now I know, after everything Abraham had done, after all the altars he'd built, after leaving his homeland and believing for a child for 25 years, it was this moment of complete surrender that made God say, "Now you've proven yourself." That's what your silence was, beloved. That was your 3-day walk up the mountain, and you didn't know it. But every step was being recorded. Every tear was being collected. Every moment you chose faith over fury was being documented in heaven's archives. Romans 8:17 declares something that should shake you to your core. Now, if we are children, then we are heirs, heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ, if indeed we share in his sufferings, in order that we may also share in his glory. Did you catch that? If indeed. Your suffering wasn't random, it was verification. It was the "if indeed" clause being fulfilled in your life. You shared in his sufferings. You walked through your own Gethsemane. You experienced your own betrayal, your own abandonment, your own cry of, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" And now, right now, in this sacred moment, heaven is saying, you've qualified for the "in order" that part, in order that you may also share in his glory. But here's what they said that's going to wreck you. Here's the part that will make you fall to your knees. They didn't just say, "You passed." They said, "You can be trusted." Trusted, not just blessed, not just healed, not just promoted. Trusted. Do you understand the weight of that word? Trust isn't given to everyone who asks for it. Trust is earned through fire. Trust is proven in the dark. Trust is what remains when everything else has been stripped away and you're still standing there with your hand in his. God has people he loves, but he has far fewer people he trusts with his glory. He has millions who want his blessing, but he has only a remnant who can carry his presence without corrupting it, without using it for their own gain, without letting it make them proud. You are that remnant. And now, at 70, at 80, at 90 years old, when the world is telling you to fade quietly into the background, heaven is handing you keys. Not metaphorical keys. Actual spiritual authority that you didn't have before. Access to rooms in the spirit that were locked until you proved yourself faithful. Your name has been written again. Not in the book of the living, you've been there since birth. Your name has been inscribed in the book of the trusted, the ones who endured, the ones who didn't break, the ones who can now be given more because they proved they wouldn't waste it, wouldn't corrupt it, wouldn't use it for selfish gain. If this pierced your heart, if something just broke open in your chest that's been locked for years, type below, "I'm trusted." Because, beloved, the test is over. The verdict is in. And what comes next will require everything you learned in the fire. But are you ready to hear what you've been trusted with? You know what's been eating at you lately, don't you? That look in their eyes when you speak. That silence that follows your words. That feeling that the people who used to get you, your own family, your oldest friends, even your church, suddenly can't relate to you anymore. And you've been asking yourself the same question over and over. What's wrong with me? Why do I feel like a stranger in rooms I used to call home? Listen to me, chosen one. Nothing is wrong with you. Something is right with you. And that's exactly why they can't understand you anymore. You see, when God promotes you in the spirit, he separates you in the natural. It's not punishment, it's protection. It's not isolation, it's elevation. And I need you to understand something that's going to shake every insecurity you've been carrying. The distance you're feeling isn't because you're losing your mind. It's because you're changing your altitude. Think about this. When an airplane takes off from LaGuardia, does it stay at street level? Does it fly at the same height as the cars on the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway? No, it climbs. And as it climbs, everything below becomes smaller, quieter, more distant. The noise of the city fades. The voices from the ground can't reach you anymore. Not because something's wrong with the plane, but because it was designed for a different atmosphere. You are that plane, beloved, and you're climbing. God spoke to Abraham in Genesis 12:1 and said something that should stop you in your tracks. Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. Notice what God asked him to leave, not just a place, but people, family, the familiar, everything that defined him. Why? Because where God was taking Abraham required a version of him that his old environment could never produce. The same is happening to you right now. But here's what breaks my heart. You've been apologizing for it. You've been shrinking yourself, dumbing down your revelations, hiding your growth because you don't want to make others uncomfortable. You've been feeling guilty for the very thing God is doing in you. Stop it. Right now. Stop apologizing for your evolution. The prophet Amos asked a question in chapter 3, verse 3, that cuts straight to the bone. Do two walk together unless they have agreed to do so? The answer is no, they don't, they can't. Not genuinely. Not for long. When your spirit is operating at a different frequency than the people around you, misunderstanding isn't a possibility, it's inevitable. And I know what you're thinking right now. But these are good people. These are godly people. My own children, my siblings, my pastor. Surely they should understand what God is doing in me, should they? Or are you expecting ground-level voices to interpret a high-altitude experience? Here's the truth that nobody's telling you. Spiritual promotion creates relational distance, not because you're better than anyone else, but because you're being positioned differently. The eagle doesn't fly with sparrows, not because the eagle is arrogant, but because they operate in different dimensions. One was made for the treetops, the other was made to touch clouds. You feel misunderstood because you are being repositioned for an assignment that your current relationships were never meant to support. Think about Joseph. His own brothers couldn't understand his dreams. They mocked him, betrayed him, threw him in a pit and sold him into slavery. Were they evil? Some were. But most of them were simply unable to comprehend a destiny they weren't chosen to share. Joseph's promotion required his separation. The pit, the prison, the palace, each level took him further from the people who knew him as the dreamer in the coat, closer to the man who would save nations. Look at Jesus. His own hometown tried to throw him off a cliff. Luke 4:29 tells us they drove him to the brow of the hill to hurl him down. Why? Because when he spoke with authority they'd never heard before, when he claimed an identity they couldn't fathom, their comfort was threatened. Familiarity became their prison, and anyone who outgrew it became their enemy. You're not losing people, chosen one. You're outgrowing frequencies, and that's not the same thing. But let me tell you what the enemy wants you to believe. He wants you to think that this misunderstanding means you're on the wrong path. He wants you to believe that if God was really in this, everyone would celebrate your growth. He wants you to crawl back to old levels because the pressure of standing alone feels unbearable. Don't you dare. The loneliness you feel right now, it's not rejection, it's recalibration. God is adjusting your frequency to match your assignment. And what's coming next will require a version of you that the old environment could never support. Not could never accept, could never support. There's a difference. The version of you that played small to keep peace, that version can't carry what's coming. The version of you that needed everyone's approval, that version will crumble under the weight of divine assignment. The version of you that measured your worth by who understood you, That version was never meant to survive this altitude. You're not changing to be difficult, you're changing to be ready. And I promise you this, the ones who are meant to walk with you in this new season will recognize you. They won't need explanations. They won't require you to shrink. They'll operate at your frequency naturally, effortlessly, because God is aligning you with those who can handle where He's taking you. If you felt misunderstood lately, if you've been carrying guilt for growing, shame for changing, fear for becoming who God is calling you to be, type right now, I'm changing. Because, beloved, what they don't understand about you today, they'll witness tomorrow. And when they see what God does through the version of you they couldn't recognize, everything will make sense. But that's only if you stop apologizing for your altitude and start preparing for your assignment. Listen to me, chosen one. Every gray hair on your head is not a sign of decline, it's a mark of victory. Every wrinkle etched into your face isn't evidence of aging. It's a map of battles you survived when hell itself said you wouldn't make it through the night. You think your best years are behind you? That's the greatest lie the enemy ever whispered in your ear. Your crown wasn't given at the starting line, it was earned at the finish line. And you, beloved, you're not crossing it, you're walking into it right now. The Apostle Paul understood something at the end of his life that most people miss at the beginning. Listen to his words in 2 Timothy 4:7-8. He says, I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day. Did you catch that? The crown was stored, past tense, already prepared, already waiting. Not earned by perfect performance, but by finishing what God started. And you're still here, still breathing, still believing. That alone qualifies you. But here's what breaks my heart about the American church today. We've been taught that crowns are for young warriors with energy and Instagram followings. We've been sold the lie that impact belongs to those under 40 with stages and platforms. But heaven doesn't measure crowns by age, it measures them by endurance. How many 70-year-olds in this nation right now believe their moment has passed? How many 85-year-olds think God retired them when their bodies slowed down? How many widows and widowers sitting in empty houses have convinced themselves their voice doesn't matter anymore? You want to know what God thinks about that? Isaiah 46:4 declares, even to your old age and grey hairs, I am He who will sustain you. I have made you, and I will carry you. I will sustain you, and I will rescue you. Even to your old age. Even. That word shatters every excuse. God isn't tolerating your continued existence, He's sustaining it on purpose. He's carrying you towards something, not away from something. Think about Moses. 80 years old when the burning bush interrupted his ordinary day. 80. The world would have given him a gold watch and a retirement home. But God gave him a nation to deliver and a sea to split. His greatest miracle didn't happen in his youth. It happened when his hair was white and his hands were weathered. Think about Anna the prophetess. 84 years old, spending every day in the temple when most people her age were at home waiting to die. But Luke 2:38 says she was the one who recognized baby Jesus and spoke about him to all who were looking for redemption in Jerusalem. Her voice mattered most at the age when society said it mattered least. Your crown isn't made of gold and jewels, beloved. Your crown is peace that surpasses understanding when everyone around you is drowning in anxiety. Your crown is authority in your prayers that makes demons tremble and angels respond. Your crown is legacy, a bloodline changed, a community impacted, a testimony that outlives your body. You spent decades building something invisible. While others were building careers that ended at retirement, you were building character that carries into eternity. While they were chasing applause that faded, you were cultivating wisdom that echoes through generations. The test you passed wasn't about success, it was about standing. It wasn't about winning every battle, it was about refusing to quit when quitting would have been easier. It wasn't about perfection, it was about perseverance. And now, right now, heaven is placing something on your head that the world cannot see, but the spiritual realm cannot miss. Authority, honor, the kind of crown that doesn't shine in spotlights, but glows in sacred moments when your grandchild asks you to pray and demons flee at the sound of your weathered voice. This crown fits differently than you expected, doesn't it? It's not heavy with obligation, it's weighted with purpose. It doesn't demand performance, it releases influence. It doesn't require a stage, it transforms every room you enter with the presence of someone who has walked with God through fire and refused to let go. Your years were not wasted in that factory job you hated. They were invested. Your decades in that difficult marriage weren't thrown away. They were deposits into an account of faithfulness that's about to pay eternal dividends. Your season of caring for aging parents while your own dreams died wasn't sacrifice without reward. It was the refining that made you qualified for what's coming next. The finish line isn't death, chosen one. The finish line is the moment you realize that every step you took in obedience, even when you couldn't see where you were going, was building something that will outlast your body and echo into eternity. If you know your life still matters, if you feel that fire still burning even as your body slows down, if you sense that God's not done writing your story, type below right now, I'm not done. Because, beloved, your crown is here. And what comes after the test will blow your mind. Chosen one, we've come to the end of this sacred hour together, but something in your chest tells you this isn't really an ending at all, is it? This is the beginning of you walking differently, moving differently, breathing differently, because you now know what was said about you when you thought no one was listening. Let me tell you something that might shake you one final time. The courtroom of heaven has adjourned. The gavel has fallen. The verdict has been read into the eternal record. And here's what breaks my heart. Most people who pass the test spend the rest of their lives still living like they're on trial. They're still defending themselves, still explaining themselves, still trying to prove to people who will never understand that they're worthy, that they matter, that God didn't forget them. But beloved, you don't owe anyone an explanation anymore. The only opinion that mattered has already been declared. Heaven has spoken. The case is closed. Philippians 1-6 says it plainly. He who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. Not might carry it, not could carry it if you're good enough. Will carry it. Present tense, active, unstoppable. You don't need to announce your victory. You don't need to post about your breakthrough. You don't need to convince your family that something shifted. Just walk differently. They'll notice. Trust me, they'll notice. Because when a verdict comes from heaven, it changes your gait. It alters your posture. It puts a weight of authority in your spirit that people can feel before you ever open your mouth. Think about Daniel walking out of that lion's den. The Bible doesn't record him giving a press conference. He didn't gather the kingdom to explain what God did. He simply walked out untouched. And the evidence spoke louder than any words could. That's you now. You're walking out of your den, and the silence of your survival is more powerful than the noise of their doubt ever was. But here's what I need you to understand as you close this video and step back into your life. The enemy is going to try one more time. He's going to wait until you're alone, maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow morning, and he's going to whisper, "Was that message really for you? Are you sure you passed? Maybe you heard wrong." And when that whisper comes, I need you to remember something. Psalm 92:14 declares, "They will still bear fruit in old age. They will stay fresh and green, still, even now, even at 70, even at 80, even at 92 years old. You are not declining, you are ripening." The verdict doesn't expire with age. It doesn't fade with time. What heaven declares over you at 85 is just as powerful as what it would have declared at 25. Maybe more so. Because now you carry the weight of faithfulness, the depth of endurance, the authority of someone who stayed when quitting made more sense. So walk like it's true, not because you feel strong every day, not because the symptoms disappeared overnight, not because suddenly everyone believes in you. Walk like it's true, because it is true. The courtroom adjourned. The door closed behind you, the future unlocked. And here's the mystery that will sustain you in the days ahead. You don't have to manufacture the strength to walk in this verdict. The verdict itself carries you. You simply rest in it. You lean into it. You let the weight of heaven's word over your life do what your own willpower never could. This is not hype, beloved. This is not temporary motivation that fades by Wednesday. This is eternal decree settling into your bones, your bloodstream, your very DNA. You have been marked. You have been sealed. You have been declared worthy not because of what you did, but because of what you survived. Before you leave this sacred space we've shared, I need you to do something, not for me, not even for yourself. For every other person who's sitting in the season you just walked out of. For everyone who's still in the fire, still in the silence, still wondering if they're going to make it. Type below right now, I receive the verdict. Say it like you mean it. Say it like heaven is listening, because heaven is listening. And when you declare it, something shifts in the atmosphere, not just for you, for everyone who comes after you. And then share this message with someone who almost quit. You know exactly who I'm talking about. That person came to your mind 3 times while you were watching this. That's not coincidence. That's assignment. They need to hear what you just heard. They need to know that the test has an end, that the silence breaks, that the verdict comes. You are no longer the same person who started this message. The word of the Lord has done its work. Now walk in it, rest in it, live from it. The court has adjourned. Your new life is waiting. And beloved, it's going to be more than you ever imagined. Go in peace. Go in power. Go in the unshakable truth that you passed. Amen.